Hi, Eva Nichols here. Today I'm going to show you how to paint Cosmos flowers in watercolor. So grab your brushes and let's get painting. Let's find some brushes that will be good for this project. So I think, as I said to you last time, I tend to like to paint with round brushes, especially for florals. Might take my dagger brush out because that's always a favorite of mine. And then maybe this size here. So I have a size 12 and a size 8, and maybe I'll go with a smaller one. Maybe I'll go with this little one here, size 4, and that should do me just fine. That's the project. And again, remember, it's not so much the size of the brush that matters, nor is it so much the colors that I use that matter. It's what I do with the colors and the brush and the water. That's what's matters. And then I'm gonna have my little obsession, as you know already, probably. Because you can see I did the lines pretty dark. Yeah. And I don't like that. So I'm gonna take my kneaded eraser and I'm just gonna kind of dab over it, or I can also roll it over. I often like to just roll it over, and it kind of picks up some of that extra pigment, not pigment, but graphite.
Does it not smudge?
The graphite smudges it will smudge if you have a really dark and then you go over with your fingers and so it smudges. And this here picks it up because this is a kneaded eraser. That's why I do it with that. And this is the only eraser that I would say you should use on your watercolor paper. You do not, for certain, not use those hard erasers that's on the back, on the top of pencils and stuff like that. Don't ever use that on your watercolor paper because it's going to damage it. Okay, so I'm going to try and contain myself here so I don't erase all the lines so I can't see what I'm doing. That's what I usually do.
It's called a kneaded eraser?
Kneaded eraser, K-N-E-A-D-E-D, because you knead it. Okay. And so what you do is you knead it. So now when I've just done it, can you see how dark it is?
Yeah.
So that's all the graphite I picked up. So obviously you don't want to keep using that. And that's where you knead it. And then you knead it a little bit. And then, pretty soon you'll have clean sides. You can use them for a very, very long time. And they come in little squares like this or rectangles like this. And I usually break mine up into at least 3 or 4 pieces because I don't like that big clump. This is kind of like how I like it, but that's all personal preference. Mm-hmm. And I also like it because sometimes, you can form it just like clay.
This is
that's exactly, small one.
There's a bigger one that's about, is it 2 by 2?
Yeah, something like that. It's going to last you forever and cost you like $1. It's a good investment. And see, if you had little tiny areas, then you can knead it and you can make it into a little point and all this stuff. So it's very handy, very handy. So there was one thing I was going to show you now that I was going to do with this one here that has the stamens there in the middle visible. So I was going to use some masking fluid or drawing gum or frisket. It has many names, but what it is it's a fluid latex that you can put on your watercolor paper and let it dry, and then you can paint over it and it protects the white of the paper, and then when you're done you can rub it off and you have saved the white of your paper, so you don't have to be careful painting around stuff. And it comes either like this, and it comes in a myriad of other brands.
Is it for the correction? Is that what you're...
No, it's not correction. It's just protection so that you can save your whites. We'll talk about corrections later because there's also several things you can do for corrections. So it comes like this, and if I use this, and what you can see what I do, I always have it in a Ziploc bag because sooner or later it's going to leak on you, and it makes a huge mess. Just saying. And yeah, you can see. And you don't want to shake it because then it does this. It gunks up. It gunks up a little bit at the top anyway, because now this one hasn't been opened for a long time. But you can see this has all gunked up in the lid here. See that? So basically what it is, it's liquid latex, and then it dries when it gets in contact with air. And for some of you ladies, maybe see, I know because I went to beauty college.
Eva of many talents.
That's right. And so now I'm just gonna, and I didn't do it, I never would want to use my brushes. Don't use your brushes. Please don't use your brushes. They're gonna be destroyed. So I use the back of a brush, or I have various and sundry tools, or a toothpick or whatever. And then, you know, here I just wanna, where do I have there? That's what I want. So then I can just rub it up, take it off like that. And I can put a little bit more on just the back of a brush. And I just want to dab in a little bit in here. That way, that's for my highlights, okay? Because that's going to be for my, and now I have to let it dry. So the thing about masking fluid is, don't use your brushes. If you want to use a brush, don't use your watercolor brushes. Have a cheap brush that's dedicated to a masking fluid application. You can even get brushes that are meant for that. Do I have one in my stash here? Yes, I certainly do. So here's, for instance, one. Masking fluid brush, short flat. So that's if I had bigger areas, and I could use this one. And then if I, had smaller areas, I could get a smaller. They come in different sizes. Even when I use a brush like this, I would then either have a little bar soap and put a little bit of soap on it first, and then I'll get the masking fluid on. Or sometimes I have a little bottle where I have soapy water in, and I dip my masking fluid brush in the soapy water first, and then I dip it in the masking fluid. And normally I wouldn't dip into the bottle itself. I would pour it into a little container, a little bit into a container, and then I would put the lid back on. Because the longer it's exposed to air, the more it's going to get gunky and not last so long. And if I keep dipping my brush in, first of all, I have it open, exposed to air, and I can kind of pollute it. So, a bottle like this is probably about $10. So, that's just what I would suggest.
How long do you let it dry there?
I let it dry until it's completely dry. And it's not quite yet. And I can't tell you how long that would be, because, it depends on what's the humidity, how thick did you apply it, and a whole bunch of other things. The only thing I can tell you is with masking fluid, there is definitely some rules that should not be broken. Or, you'll have to pay the price, so to speak. And one of them is, don't use your watercolor brushes. That's step one. Number two is, do never, ever, ever apply to damp or wet paper. Never paint over masking fluid that has not dried yet. And when you, at the stage where you rub it off, never rub it off until everything is completely bone dry. Those are kind of like the rules. And if you break any of those, you will, as I say, pay the price. If I started painting over it now, and I can see that big blob there is not completely dry, well, guess what? I'll have masking fluid in my watercolor brush, and I can't get it out again. That's just how that works. And there are things, like some people say you can use lighter fluid to get it out and stuff, but you can maybe you can, but do you think your brush is going to be as good as new? No. It's not. And then also, if you start rubbing it off, when everything's not dry, well, obviously you're going to smudge everything, and you might rip the paper. So those are kind of like, really. So I always say with the masking fluid, it's like dry, dry, and dry. That's kind of like the rule. The masking fluid has to be dry. It has to be applied on dry paper, and it has to be rubbed off dry paper. That's masking fluid. And since we're at it, there is now such a tool as this little gadget here. That's PBO. That's the same brand as this one here that I tend to like. And I used to really, really strongly promote this because I loved it. Unfortunately, it seems to me that they have changed the formula a little bit, and I've talked to a lot of other artists, including Birgit O'Connor, who I look very much up to, and she's a very experienced watercolorist. And we have had our chats about this, and I have found that sometimes I feel that it stains the paper a little bit. Like they have made it more blue. It used to be more gray. Of course, the manufacturer, don't hear nothing of it. But so I'm a little bit on the fence with it now. But anyway, they have also come out with this masking pen, or what do they call it? Drawing gum, high precision masking marker. And you have to pump it a little bit. And this, if you want to apply like really fine lines, and you can, it comes with an extra little tip, and it's a hard tip. So you don't want to do too much of this pumping on the paper, because I feel it makes indentations in the paper. But if you wanted to do like really fine line, can you see how you can get really fine lines with it? So that's kind of nice. But it's not a must. You can do something similar if you used a toothpick or something. But anyway, it's there. There's always new gadgets coming out. And
can you use that one?
Yeah, I could have used that for the inside. I just didn't do it here because I wasn't sure if some of you have it, you can use it for in there. Okay. I just wanted to show you there's a different way. I mean, there's many ways of doing things. You know, pretty much wherever I show you, I'm sure there's 20 other ways it could be done. And then finally, I like to have, now I cut mine in half. This is called a rubber cement eraser. Why it's called such a weird thing, I have no clue. It's a masking fluid picker-upper, and so that's the tool I would use to pick up my masking fluid when I'm done. You can also use your fingers, but I like using this better, and I'm happy to share it. So those are all those little things. And of course, I did not have, if you didn't have masking fluid, it doesn't matter. First of all, you can borrow from me, you can try my pen, you can try everything you want. So I could have left it dry and just painted around it. Masking fluid is just, in some instances, it really comes in handy because it would be very tough to do something. Painting around a background or something like that, something very delicate. Here, it wouldn't be that hard to just leave that dry. All right, so let's get started, for heaven's sake. So my 2 containers of water, I already sprayed my colors. So I'm going to take a little bit, thank you, of my, dangerous, right? Little bit of my Quinacrodone red. I might just do a second puddle here. I do that because, that way I have 2 clean puddles, and pretty soon I'll have a dirty and maybe a clean, and then I'll end up with 2 dirty ones. And then I'm gonna go with my cobalt blue this time. And if you don't have cobalt blue, use whatever blue you have. If you have the French Ultramarine blue, that'll work just as well. You might want to put maybe a little bit more water in, because you can see cobalt blue is kind of a lighter blue. And then I'll go over here, and I'll put some yellow over here. And as a matter of fact, I should also do definitely 2 puddles of the blue, because one I'm going to use to make green. And I might have to, I'm probably going to go also with some French Ultramarine blue here, because once I want darker greens, cobalt blue, because it's not a very dark, it only goes to about mid-tone, as well as darkness. You can't get dark with a blue like that, because it's just not a dark blue, right? So I would probably need to get a little bit of the French Ultramarine blue out once I want to go really dark. Let's get a little water on that one. So I might as well take that out now. Then I have my colors. And I could also go with
the ultramarine?
Yeah, French ultramarine blue or ultramarine blue. Some brands call it ultramarine blue and some call it French ultramarine blue. And I have tried to look up many times what the difference is, and I have never really, there's not, in my opinion, there's not really a good explanation. Not one that's good enough that I can remember it, and I have looked it up at least 5 times. It's just kind of wishy-washy, and they don't really get to the point. So I don't really think, I think it's more like happenstance. So, and here we have it. So those are the colors I'm going to be using. And now I'm going to go, and I am going to let me start, let me start with this bottom one here. I'm gonna put a little bit of water in. I'm gonna start with the bottom one and the outside petals here. Let me see, yeah, I'm in focus.
Ava, could we scoot your water?
Yes,
just
of
a
course,
little
of course,
bit?
yes,
Thank
yes,
you. I
yes.
don't wanna block
No, I wanna do it
anybody
like
else,
here
but
so I
yeah.
don't reach over every time.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm gonna go down the stem just a little bit. Can you see where I applied the water?
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, I try to leave myself a little room to the lines as best I can. And let me get a little bit of the Quinacrodone red. And I'm gonna start with this and just run it in here at the top. And then I'm gonna not even rinse out my brush, and then I'm just doing my tip in a little bit of the blue. And I'm gonna run that in more from the bottom. Just wanna try and get a little variance here.
So you get a little purple there.
Yeah, a little purpley. Just like that. Rinse it out. And now I'm taking the water out of my brush, so I'm making it thirsty, and I'm gonna go in here and pick up a little bit.
To make it lighter.
Make it lighter, correct. And then down here. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of the Cobalt and put it down here. And I could actually go down the stem, why not? Take a little bit of the dirty water.
I use the tissue to lighten it because it absorbs.
Yeah, but it's not very precise. If you use a tissue, it's not very precise. So I just want to take a little bit more out. And before the blue dries, let's put a little bit of yellow into it, right? Because I like it to end up being green. And so now that's just the first go around. I'll just indicate the stem. And then go here. And you know, I always like to not have it, not have it all the same color. Makes it more interesting, the stem especially. So I have decided my light source comes from here. And I kind of needed to know that now because I wanted to just darken a little bit on the side of the stem that's away from the light. Might as well do that while I can. And I like what happened here. That was on purpose that I put that yellow in before things dried up here, because I personally like that softness up there. I think that looks pretty. Now, if that is not a look you want, you would rather have a defined line, then you should wait until these petals are dry, right? And while now my masking is dry, I wanted to get a petal in here too, so that you can see the difference in the application. And that way you can paint on both your flowers, so we don't spend so much time on demos. This one is not a super complicated flower. So let's just get some water in here. So I'm gonna do it like this. In that petal and a little bit in that petal that's below there. It's turning over. So I can see a little bit of the inside of this petal, and then this is the outside of the petal because it curves over like this. Does that make like this? So here, that's where I put the water. And here, let's go with a little tiny bit of the red here and here. And I want to get a little bit of the cobalt blue in to kind of purple it up just a little bit, make it a little bit more pink. Pink is you know, just red with some blue in it. There. And now I want to rinse it out, and I just want to drag it down like that. And I would like this one Just a little bit more of the blue down here maybe. I want to have a little color down here, but not too much. The reason I want to have a little color down there is because, you know, I masked out these stamens and they're going to be, you know, there's going to be some white highlights there. Now, they're not going to leave all that white, you'll see that. But that way, because of that, I definitely do want to have a little bit of color on the petals so there's a difference. So it's not like white on white, because then, you know, can't really see. And I think I want to put a little bit more, maybe just a little bit more color in here. I want to make it a little bit more pinkish there. And I could totally have used a pink, but I'm working with just primary colors again, so, and a pink would just be, I mean, I could have done that, but I know not all of you have those colors. And see how I'm just dragging it down a little bit? Because they do have like little like folds in them. So if I dragged it down while they're still wet, I get a little bit of that soft look, you know, because they're kind of, yeah, wavy, exactly. And that's that. And on this one here, so now I have to decide, and I think I have decided that I want to make the bottom of this part of this flower, the bottom part, darker and then lighter as it goes up, because that would really offset these tips. Since I kept them kind of dark, light, I want to keep that. And so then I need to put something dark behind them, right? So let's do that, because we can actually paint this one. Now here's another place where I could have used my masking, would have been a smart thing to do. I masked this stem right, so I don't have to be careful about painting around it. Just, I don't have to mask it the whole way, just right there where it cuts across the flower. That's where masking comes in handy. I could totally paint and try and keep it dry, but you know, it's easier with masking. I just have to let it dry now. So while that dries, let's try and see if we can mix ourselves a nice darker color, darker pink color, by putting that cobalt blue into the red, the Quinacrodone red. So it's not that often that I mix directly on the palette, but sometimes it comes in handy. Just a little bit more. There, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Not super dark, but can you see how that turned it much more pink than over there? Okay, so now I used my pen because that one puts on a very thin layer, so it'll make my, it'll dry quickly, so now I can put water on. Because remember, that was the no-no. Don't put water on where there's wet masking or damp masking, everything. So I'm just putting a little water into all these little petals here on it. We're gonna paint those as one to start with anyway, and then we'll see.
Before you put color on there, can you kind of hold it up so we can see how much water? Because my water ratio is what's so difficult.
Yes, so not so that it can see, it doesn't run,
Right.
but it's shiny.
Right.
And I don't put it all the way out to the edges.
Do you apply the watercolor when there's still water in it?
Yes, yes, that's the whole reason I put the water on, is so that, and the reason I'm putting the water in is because if I just paint it on dry, it doesn't run anywhere, and it dries on me, of course, very quickly, and I get these lines where I didn't want a line. So that's what the water makes everything blend together. So if I want things to blend together, that's usually when I do this called wet into wet. So I'll just put a little bit more water on here. And then we're going to start from, so now I'm going to turn it upside down. Taping, yes. And I'm carefully painting around these front tips of the petals first, because that's where I need to be precise. The rest is going to run where the water is. And here. And I'm putting, again, we did that last time too when we painted the rose. We want to make sure that, you know, it's a good idea to start putting the pigment on. And see, now I can paint over here. And I don't have to be careful, haha.
So that dries really fast when it's just that thin.
Yes, it dries very fast when it's that thin, the masking. And now I'm just dragging up like this and goes a little bit like this. And now I gotta get a move on because I can feel that it's drying very quickly. And so I have a damp brush, not wet, and then I'm just gonna drag this up. So get that nice, you know, transition between from light, from dark to light. I like it really, really light up here. And then see if I can get away with it. If I'm fast enough.
If you're painting in a humid climate, it's
Oh my
all
gosh, you
different.
can have a tea break. Or another kind of break. But not when you paint in our dry climate here in Reno, Truckee, up in the mountains, you know, where it's so dry. We gotta be speed painters. And you know, I learned to paint when I was, I lived on the Monterey Peninsula, out on the, you know, central coast, and I lived on, you know, for a part of the time I lived in Pacific Grove, which is like, you know, Fog City. It was like 100% humidity. My goodness, it could take days for things to dry. So I really had to, you know, learn to speed it up. So I'm just fixing a few little things here. And here again, you could also, you know, use the thirsty brush and pick up a little bit. But see how nicely that then pushed out these here? So I think I have painted enough, and now it's your turn. So you can paint. You can paint all the petals as you want, and I'm gonna save one of those turned over petals to show you how to deal with that. Okay? That will most likely be darker. Yes. It's, you know, sometimes it depends. It's, you know, the reason I say most times it depends on, you know, what the flowers. Some flowers have a lighter outside. Some flowers have a dark outside.
On one of the
But-
stencils, it hurt. The
Yeah,
top
it
one
does.
goes like that.
Exactly. And here they're away from the light, so those are definitely going to be darker. Now this one is getting hit by the light. So that's going to be lighter, and I'm going to do the underside darker. So that's why I didn't say yes or no, because it all depends. Light, the way light falls changes how we perceive color so much. Try and look out that back window, for instance. Can you see how the light shines through those leaves there, those green leaves? See how bright they look? And then there's a couple of the stems going over, and they're kind of like backlit then, and they look really, really dark. And if you look at this bush here, where some of the leaves are being hit by the lights and others are not, can you see the color difference? Yeah. But they're all the same color.
Yeah.
But they're lit differently, so that's why, you know, everything is relative, and we all see things a little bit differently. So, you know, we have different interpretations of what green it is and stuff like that. So I always am very hesitant to say that, yeah, it's this color, it's that color. Well, how do you see it, that color? And that's part of what art is, I think, is that we get to infuse some of how we perceive the world. And we share that with the rest of the world, you know? I mean, it's I don't know, that's just how I see it. And to me, that's what art is. We get to share our vision of the world, and we all have different visions of the world, even though we're looking at the same thing. We have different perceptions. We have our own filters. So, and that's what's so fun, comes out in our paintings. All right, so this one here, I'm not gonna fiddle around with it too much. And I'm gonna save it until I get to a place here where I need for something to dry. So I'm gonna start on this one here, the underside of this petal. Underside of this petal, and I'm just gonna put some water on. And I have to be a little careful because there's a little bit of the overturn of this petal underneath that's sticking into it or over it. So I am going to do a little bit, I already said here I was going to do it a little bit darker underneath there because this turnover is kind of casting a shadow. And so I want it darker here, and especially on the underside it's going to be even darker. Here it's going to be even darker because it's away from the light, and it gives me a chance to push out that part of the petal that's overturned. And the same here, I'm going to do it a little dark around that little thing that overlaps. I'm going to rinse out my brush. Put
So
maybe
when you
just
say darker, it's still just red, you aren't adding any.
I am
blue.
adding a little bit of the blue, yeah.
you
I am,
do?
yeah, I am.
The
Just to make it
cobalt?
more, yeah, cobalt.
Okay.
Just to make it a little bit more pinkish. Now, on the one that I had painted at home, I used, and now I'm lifting out a little bit, can you see?
Yeah.
And what do I want to do? The one I had painted at home, I used the permanent rose, so I used a pink. So here, I want to do it a little bit darker, like right around there. And then I want it, while it's still damp, I can put in just a little bit more darkness here to just kind of really give it a little bit of a pop. And then I'm thinking about, remember we had that question also, so what is on top and what is below? So if I go in and darken here a little bit, can you see how now I'm saying that this petal is in front? And I was just taking a little moment to decide what I wanted to do, because you know, it's my flower, I get to decide, right? A lot of these things, it's a matter of interpretation. It's not right or wrong, it's just whatever, you know, you want to do. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to try and see if I can get away with a couple of little lines to kind of indicate that, you know, they have those little folds, just kind of like I did up there. Now can you see when they're hard lined like that, this doesn't look very good. So right away, it was already dry here. So with a damp brush, not wet, I go in and I just kind of fuss it up a little bit, just so it's not so harsh. There, I kind of like that. Doesn't it kind of say it has those folds?
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say. This is dry. So then I'm going to paint. This is a petal that's kind of like this. And those three are like that, right? They're folding over. Because I'm seeing it, I mean, you know, I'm not seeing it straight on, you know, and rarely do we see flowers like straight on. They're always like on some kind of a little bit of an angle. So I'm going to have to get myself a little bit more paint. So I'm running a little low. And I'm just putting a little bit of that cobalt in the Quinacrodone red. Just mixing it here. I might steal a little bit of that not Ultramarine blue, the Cobalt. I'm still just operating with Cobalt right here. All right, so here, I put a little bit more water on my brush, and so I can try and do this one wet on dry. So I have fairly wet paint, but I'm painting on the dry paper. You've already noticed that a lot of times I do prefer to paint wet on wet. That's kind of my favorite method, but you know, we got to mix it up sometimes. All right, I got a little paint on there. It's still wet, so I can, you know, rinse out my brush a little bit and then just kind of
Why did you do
pull it
wet
out.
on dry?
Because I want
A different.
yeah, I want it darker, and I also want to show you that there's more ways than one to do it. It's not like, you know, it has to be wet on wet all the time. And so I want it a little lighter on this side here because of the light. I'm thinking the light would hit that edge. That's just what I make up in my mind. But there's certain logic to it, right?
Right.
And again, it just makes it a little bit more interesting. So that's like that. Like that. And I think I might go in and just strengthen the color a little bit down here. And even kind of do, if I can get a little bit of a, that's still flowing too much, but just strengthen the color a little bit. All right, so I can't paint, well I could, but it's not going to be a very good result. I have to skip this one, right, because it's next to a wet area. So why don't I just go down here? Now that's gonna be pretty dark. So I think I might just have to load up with a little bit more cobalt over here. Rinse my brush. See what a lovely color that is when you look at the water?
Like your water container.
Yes. And then here, a little bit more of the red. Now I can tell you that when you mix the red and the cobalt blue does not have nearly as much tinting power as the red. The red will take over the blue before the blue will take over the red. So what I mean by that is you actually don't need very much red to turn the blue into a purple or lavender, whatever color you want to call that. Whereas it takes a lot more blue if I had gone it the other way, you know. Cobalt, I always like to say Cobalt, he's a wimp. He just, you know, he's just not. So here I'm doing the same. Wet on dry, but can you see I have a lot of paint on? It's almost like bubbling up because I don't want that thing to dry on me if I can help it. So I'm gonna put that dark right around here.
And that's on a dry.
On dry, yes, on dry. So it's wet on dry. So wet paint on dry paper. And now I rinsed out my brush. I might put a little bit of the red in. And then I'm going in from the dry side before this dries on me. And then I'm gonna pull out this color from that dark corner, and then so it goes lighter as we come up towards the light. And this part that is still white, that's the lightest part of that part of the petal, right? Because of the light, I'm thinking the light will be hitting right there. And I already painted a little dark underneath it, so obviously I don't want it the same color. I want it a lot lighter. So almost white, but not quite. There, that's okay. Little fix here. There. I have to get back to that one and cast a shadow later, but we'll do that. And I'm right now I'm just smoothing out. There, I got a nice light tip, because I'm thinking the light's gonna hit that tip. All right, so far so good. And then here, I'm gonna just take up a bit of that pencil line I got. And then here, I have a little bit of overturn, just like this. And so again, I probably might even go with my number 4 here because it's a tiny little area. I'm gonna probably go with that same dark color, just on the tip of this brush because it's such a tiny area. And then I'm gonna go in on the underside where it'll be drier, it'll be darker. And then I'm just gonna go up like this. I'm gonna rinse my brush, clean, and then it's just damp. And then I'm gonna, before this dries out on me, hopefully, I'm gonna pull it out, and that tip here will also be light, especially on the upside here, because again, the light will hit here, right? That's where it hits. And I'm gonna leave that since that looks pretty okay. So see how it starts giving it shape. Light, always, you know, I always have this light against dark, dark against light. That's what I tell myself inside my brain when I'm kind of like thinking, what do I do here? And then I look, and then I say, is it lighter or is it darker? And then I, you know, decide. And then you can also cool, like blue. If I blew it down a little bit, that also pushes it down. And warm brings forward. Cool pushes away or down. So that's how that is. Now, while I can, is this? And so these two are the exact same thing. This one here, it's a little bit bigger, right? So I could maybe put a little bit of water in. So I'll put a little water up in the tip. That's gonna be the lightest, because again, where's my light? This is the first place it hits. Then it curves under, so it goes away from the light. So underneath here is gonna be dark. So I can start with that. Little bit of dark here and here. Go up a little bit like that. And then I think I want to take my little bit bigger brush, a little bit of red on maybe. And then I go in and I pull this color up before it dries on me. You see how I pull it up? Yeah. And it slowly, it kind of guide it up. And I want this edge to be lighter than what's underneath there. And so this edge could be really, really light. And here, like that. Got it. Pretty well. And now I want to see if I can still, see if we can get a little bit of that stripy effect. Would be kind of nice. While it's still damp, right? And make sure you get them, has to be in like the right direction, right? Saying that those folds are also there. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. Good. And little fix here. A little bit lighter there. All right. So while that just dries for a moment, I could go in. I could leave this the way it is. I mean, just have it a very loose, interpretation. Or I could go in and give it a little bit more definition. But this one, which one would you say would be the star in this show? Well, it's definitely that one, right? Yeah. So that's where we want to put most detail. And this one, we have to be careful that we don't overdo all the detailing on that, so they start fighting with who's the star. But we can still give it a little bit. So I put a little tiny bit of color on my tip of my brush, and I go down and I want to just separate these petals a little bit. Can you see how already? Can you see that? Make that one pop out, right? And let's do it again. That was so much fun. Let's do it on this one. Just like that. Rinse my brush and pull the color out. And see how we have separated? Mm-hmm. And then I'm feeling, and again, it's my flower, so I can do what I want. I'm feeling that this one is the one that's most in front. So I put the shadow color on here, and then I lose the edge on this side to push this one under a little bit. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. Now that's pushed under a little bit. Can make it a little bit more dramatic. Oh, you can't see because of my things here. And so here again, I want to just, so I lose the edge on one side and have it defined on the other, where I want to split two things apart. Can you see how that gave it more oomph, I like to call it.
Ava, was that your red with your cobalt blue mixture?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
And just very light, because this was already so light, there's no need to go, overboard with darkness here. It takes very little to get that. And then one other thing I feel like doing, and that is going with my little bit of a darker, more bluish color on the inside here. Just on the bottom of this flower, and a little bit on this side here. Maybe even around there, and down here, just to give it a little bit more pizzazz. Can you see I put it in like that? Might even go in and do here. There. Now,
And what color is that?
that was also the Quinacrodone red with cobalt in it, just a little bit more intense. And now I want to soften up here, so lose that line at the top here. So get in and get that done. A little bit on this side maybe. And then, can you see that just makes it like gives it a little bit more depth. And I could go in here also and get, if I can, get a little bit of those folds, right? Just a bit, not too much. And I think that's about, take a look, little too much. So if I feel it's a little overboard, I go in and smoosh them out a little bit. But can you see how it made it a little bit more depth to it?
Yeah.
So it's not so wishy-washy. And then let's get a little bit of depth to the stem there. So just fine tune that a little bit. And so here, that's where, I pulled in a little bit of that French ultramarine blue, and I'll put a little bit of yellow in and make myself a green actually. And then I will go in and give it a little bit more shape. So I put a little bit of that dark blue on the shadow side of this stem and this head. And I want to get a little bit more of that darkness on the stem underneath here to kind of say, you know, it has a little bit. You know how they have like a little, I don't know, a little bulb or whatever where the flower comes out. And then, so there'll be a little shadow underneath here. And then I'm gonna fine tune this stem a little bit, give it a little bit more pizzazz. Now you can see I don't normally go all the way down with the same color because I like to have, like you can see out there, how, you know, this dabbled light that you often see when you are seeing flowers. You know, the light is kind of dabbled. So there'll be shadow parts and then there'll be a little highlight part. And it's just also just aesthetically, it's just a little bit more pleasing.
So what's the tinting power of the yellow versus the blue?
Oh, the yellow is so much stronger.
Oh, okay.
Much, much stronger. And the yellow travels much more. It flows further. And that's the thing about colors. And that's another reason why it's better, I find, to start with not too many different colors in your palette, because it really takes time to get to know them, because they don't react the same. They're very different. Some are staining, some are non-staining, some are granulating, meaning that they kind of, when they dry, they kind of separate a little bit. And some, you know, flow really fast. Others barely move, and there's so many different things to think about. Now, this petal, I'm gonna paint it exactly like I painted the other one, so I'm not gonna bother with that, but I wanna show you how I do the first part of the inside there that we masked out. So there, I would just take a little tiny bit of a yellow, and I'm just gonna paint it in like that.
Just plain yellow.
Just plain yellow.
So cute.
And so then I'm gonna let that dry. And when that has completely dried, I'm gonna go in, and I have actually 2 of these pens. I don't know where the other one is. Oh, it's right there. So you can borrow these. And then I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna make a few more dots with the masking fluid when it's completely dry. And then I'll go in and put on a little bit of an orangey color, so I'll put a little red in my yellow, and then I'll paint over that. And then we can lift it off when it's dry. And then of course I'll do the same thing with the, I'm finished with those petals underneath. Then I can take this masking off. There. See how nice that was? I didn't have to paint around that.
Clean.
And then I can go in and I can put a little water inside my stem, all the way down here. And then I'm gonna go with a little bit of the yellow and put it inside. And there. And then I'm not even gonna bother rinsing my brush out, and then I'm gonna go into that green that I created earlier. Put that in. And then I'm gonna put that in mainly on the shadow side. And see, it blends by itself, right? Because now it's wet. And the areas where it's dry, it won't blend, but that's okay. You can get away with it. And there's that. Let's darken a little bit up here, because it's in shadow, because that flower head is casting a shadow. So, and I also would like to have it a little dark here over the white. And then here. And put a little bit more down there. And now I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow on my brush, but I didn't rinse out my brush, and that way I get nice variety of color without doing much other than just putting it on and letting it do its thing. And a little bit more of the dark down here. There. I'm pretty okay with this. I think that looks okay. And then we have those little things here. They'll be a little darker also. there's a little bit of a, yeah, I don't know if it's a leftover sepal or whatever it is. Who knows? I don't exactly know, but I know there's a little green sticking out there, and I had a little green sticking out here. It's probably sepals. And just a little bit out there. And I'll put a little dark right at the bottom here and let it spread out on its own there. A little bit dark in here. Up around the flower head, that's always nice. A little contrast, since that's the star of the show. All right, and then I'll call that good. And I just need that. And no, in the meantime, this one probably dried enough. Yes, it's dry.
Oh, with the yellow you put on.
Yeah, with the yellow I put on there, and once that yellow is dry, you can put in a few more little dabs. And that way we'll save, so then when we rub it off, there'll be some white spots, there'll be some yellow spots, and then once this masking's dried, I'm gonna paint over with a little bit of orange by putting a little red in the yellow, and then let the whole thing dry, and then I'm gonna rub it off, and I'll show you that, and then I'm gonna finish it up. Was I finished off all my petals, and I put a little orange. First I put a little bit of the masking fluid on. You saw that. And then I put, once that was dry, I put a little bit of orange, which I created by, you know, mixing a little bit of red into my yellow. And now this is dry. And what I want to do then is, now I can take that off, masking fluid, and this is what I'm left with. So yeah, so it's a pretty good beginning, but you know, I had a little bit more masking fluid on, and that's always hard. Masking fluid you can never do really precise, in my opinion. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of my yellow, and I'm just going to dab it in here and there. There's that. And then I'm going to put a little bit of green on and put a little bit of that in, because, you know, if you look at those stamens on these things, you know, they have a little green on them too. So I'm going to dab that in too. It's a little wet, so it's going to run here and there, but that's okay. I'm fine with that. Can you see how it's beginning to kind of take shape then? Mm-hmm. And now that's going to dry for a little bit. Doesn't need to dry very long, because, you know, it's just a little bit of paint. So now I have a dark green over here. And if I go into a little bit of my red puddle here, green and red, they're complementary colors. So I'm just mixing, basically what I'm doing is I'm mixing all three primary colors together until I get a nice dark that I can live with. A bit more green here.
Are you trying to create a brown?
A brownish dark color, yeah, that's what I'm after. I want a little bit of a dark color. And brownish is good with this. Here, I think I'm happy. Can you see how I just kind of hopped around? I skipped around in all my little puddles there until I get a nice dirty color. So the thing about it is, you know, a lot of times what happens in watercolor is that we get too many colors that mix and mingle, and it wasn't what we wanted, and then we call it mud. Ugh, and we're not happy with it, mud. So you always say, you know, here watercolor says, oh, it turned muddy or whatever. But sometimes that's what we need. Then we call it neutrals. Right? So now I created a neutral. I didn't create mud because I did it on purpose, and then it's neutral. And a dark neutral and so now I can go in and I do a little bit of those. Don't overdo this because I don't want to lose the little light sparkles, but you know, there are some little areas that are going to be really dark, and that's going to pull the whole thing together, and especially down at the bottom here, away from the light. Can you see how that begins to really give that feeling of all those little, and I'm just going to go in and soften it a couple of places, just because, you know, I don't want it too, you know, I don't want it a bunch of little polka dots either. But can you see how that kind of gives it lively, and it's, you know, all these little stamens, and they cast, you know, they cast little shadows on themselves and stuff. Now, if I really wanted to go and make this flower a little bit more dramatic, I'll show you how to do that. You don't have to do it, but I want to show you. So then we need to go in and cast some shadows. And so that means that let's create a good shadow color. So now I'm going to go in and do a little bit of my French ultramarine blue and put a little, you know, make it purple here. There, that's a good purple shadow. So that's a cast shadow. That means that something is blocking the light, and there'll be a shadow. We all cast shadows, and, you know, depends on where the light source is, the shadow is on the opposite side. So the light is hitting here, and then this little overturn is actually casting a little bit of a shadow underneath there. So let's do that. And you can do it really dramatic. Like right now I'm doing a little bit on the dramatic side. Can you see that? You don't have to do that if that scares the bejesus out of you. But, you know, I'm here to show you. So and let's see, this thing is also casting a shadow. Can you see how you can make it really dramatic by doing those kinds of things? So then there'll be a little shadow maybe in here. And this is much easier. Now I'm just kind of showing you, you know, out of my head. But this is much, much easier if you have a reference that you have followed. Then it's much easier to do these things. But, you know, I've done it enough times, so I kind of know where these shadows would fall. I don't know what they're doing up there.
Move the chairs, you know.
Yeah. And then I can go in and darken a little bit more in here, just at the bottom of this stuff. And maybe I want to darken a little bit here. That's not necessarily a cast shadow. If it's not a cast shadow, you don't want it to have a hard edge. Cast shadows have hard edges. Form shadows, they have soft edges. Can you see how I'm just dramatizing here a little bit? Put a little bit more darkness behind there. And this is all optional stuff. But I have painters here that have been painting for a while, so I need to push them a little bit. If you're just a newbie, don't feel you have to do this. If this is just really not what you want to do and you're happy with your painting and you don't want to, you're afraid of, you know, messing it up or whatever.
What was the second kind of, you said a cast shadow has
Cast hard edges.
What was the other kind?
That's a form shadow. That's depicting a form. So when things are slowly moving away from the light, right? And see here, I can just, you know, here I'm kicking up the drama here by darkening some of those darker areas. And this is all optional, but you can see when you do that, it just makes it a little bit more dramatic. And it's all a matter of temperament, whatever, if you want to do this or you don't want to do it. I just want to show you that that's what can be done. And
And again, what color are you using? Your
I'm using,
neutral?
no, for
No.
this one I used a purple that I created.
Oh, purple.
I don't like so you can, it all depends. I feel that my shadows in my paintings are mostly on the purple side. That's what I like.
From Ultramarine and red.
It was ultramarine blue and the quinacrodone red I used to create that. And here I want to soften this line a little bit. And this line. But you can see how
Oh, yeah, that really makes it.
it makes it more dramatic. Makes it more dramatic. And then of course, you know, I should probably cast some shadow down here. Also like something like that across that stem. Should cast a little shadow across that stem. And not a lot more I want to do with that. But there you have it. In here could be a little bit more dark. So I just, if I want to kick up the drama in my paintings, I go in and I look at little areas, little opportunities to put dark in. Of course, it just makes it more dramatic. And of course, it has to make some sort of sense, but don't, you know, don't be afraid of a little shadow action. So here, I'm just going in, I'm looking at it and seeing where I feel I could use a little dark, and then I put it in. There, soften that. And the more I do that, of course, the more it kind of starts really taking shape. But you don't have to. I think I'll call this one done.